Lead it.
I think we're live. Hi everybody, it's Lisa Watego here from the Critical Classroom. My co-host has just gone to somewhere else. Sorry, we're just getting ourselves organised. We've just come back from Hawaii, so we're a little bit disorganised. But it's the 4th of June 2014, and this is the second after-dinner session with Hangout with the Critical Classroom. We are live, and I think we're recording. And as we're doing this, it's actually being archived onto YouTube, so you can see it there. So you can view it here in Hangouts, or you can also watch it on YouTube. Just a few. I'm going to turn my phone off because that's what you do. Before we start, I'll just do some housekeeping to get that out of the way. At the end of the broadcast, I'm going to update the show notes. So that's on YouTube. You know, in the bottom of the YouTube video where there's all that text, I'll update the show notes there with any links and topics that we talk about. So you don't have to go looking for them now. The second thing is that you might be watching this show live right now, and I think we have 0 viewers. So once again, nobody's watching right now, but that's okay. Or you might be watching it in 6 months or 6 years. So hello from the past if you are watching this in 6 years or next week even. The next thing I need to say as part of our housekeeping is that we will more than likely either tonight or in a future session mention people and discuss people, show images of people who have passed away, of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have passed away. So I'm just putting that warning out there to let you know that we will do it with the utmost respect, and as much as possible we will actually let people know that that's what we're doing. But I just thought I'd just kind of say that at the start, so that in case we end up talking about something that we shouldn't be. The next thing I need to say is that we don't control Google. We don't own Google. We are completely at the mercy of their technology and the mercy of our internet providers. So I need to apologise right now in advance for any technical issues that we may be experiencing at some point in the next 1 minute or the next half hour. Anything could happen, and if suddenly one of us or both of us go off the air, we'll work out what happened, try to get back on, but if we can't, we'll write a post and let you know what happened. You know, the north side of Brisbane could go out, have a blackout, and I'm off. So if we suddenly go off in a sec, we're still here. There you go. If we go off, then we'll let you know. We'll tweet or Facebook or whatever what happened. The other thing that I need to say specific to tonight is that poor old Lisa. This is what you get for living in Sydney, Lisa. But Lisa is actually sick. She has a cold. So hello, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
She has a cold. So if she suddenly starts coughing, she's going to try to mute her microphone, but stay on the air, though muted. But it is winter. It's the official day of winter in Australia. So yes, we understand that these things happen. So that's all of the housekeeping out of the way. I just want to say thank you for joining us. My name is Lisa Watego, and I'm the writer at the Critical Classroom. And Lisa Buxton, my co-host, is an Aboriginal Education Officer for the Catholic Education Office in Sydney. Say hi again, Lisa.
Hi.
Okay, so before we start, so now that the housekeeping is out of the way, I would like to do something that is customary now in Australia. I think I said that last time. It's now customary. I think it has always been a custom, but it is something that we have begun to do certainly in the last couple of decades. And I'm just going to screen share something so that you can all see it. So I'm just going to screen share, which is what one? Hold on a sec. Screen share, here we go. And this is the one I want to show you. Start screen share. So that's working, isn't it? So this is what I wanted to show you. I'm just going to see if I can make that a bit bigger. And slide view, isn't it? Well, I don't want to do that because it takes away all my notes. There. So that's what if you can read this, you are on Aboriginal land. So that's part of my acknowledgement of the acknowledgement of country, and acknowledging the traditional owners, and acknowledging. I need to stop screen sharing. Have I stopped screen sharing? I don't know if I have. Okay. I had 2 screens last time, but they disappeared. Somebody stole my other screen. So that slide was used by Dr. Jean Phillips from the Queensland University of Technology within the education faculty, and I think she was the first person to use it in an education context. What I think that the slide really does is it reminds us. So if you're imagine if you're walking into a lecture theatre for the first lecture of a semester, and that's the slide you see, you are reminded immediately that you are on sovereign land. You are reminded immediately that Aboriginal people have not ceded sovereignty of the continent. And I know that some of you actually may not be watching from the Australian continent, but there's a really good chance that you are actually on the land of some of Indigenous peoples from somewhere. And I've met a lot of people who I know when I was teaching at QCA, I would have international students who would say, they'd be learning about Indigenous culture and suddenly realise, we have Indigenous people too, and some of these issues are the same. So I think that it's a particularly relevant statement, and I think it's a really powerful way of not acknowledging country. But to begin, I would like to acknowledge that I'm actually broadcasting from Turrbal and Yuggera country. Many people call this place Brisbane, but this is certainly the homeland and the place of the Turrbal and Yuggera people. Lisa, so where are you broadcasting from?
I'm broadcasting from Gadigal country, who are one of the 29 main groups of the Eora Nation, which is now known as the Sydney region.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you. So as I said in the introduction, Lisa and I both have just returned from Hawaii. And when you say that you've returned from Hawaii, or you're going to Hawaii, people think, oh, you're going on a big holiday. We weren't there for a holiday. We were there for a very excellent conference, the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education, and we talked briefly about this. Oh, not briefly, but we talked about this in our first hangout. The conference was held in Honolulu at the Waikiki end, I think. Waikiki is not just a beach, but like an area or a suburb. And it was at Kapolani Community College, which is one of the campuses of the University of Hawaii. At the conference, there were people from all over the world: North America, Canada, Alaska. Sami people were there. Sami people are from the lands that we know now. We call them Finland and Norway and Sweden and those places. There were also people from New Zealand, Hawaii, of course, Japan, Taiwan, Australia. I think I've got everybody. And South America too as well. It was a fantastic conference, and we'll just talk a bit about it. How was the conference for you, Lisa? What was sort of maybe 1 or 2 highlights of the conference? I know we have to write up some posts, which we haven't done yet, for the Critical Classroom, but just briefly, what were some of the highlights for you from the WIPSI conference?
Well, that's not the easy question, in that there were so many workshops that we were able to attend. I suppose it's the sharing of Indigenous knowledge, but if I was to say what was a highlight, I think it would be the first keynote of the conference that was on the opening day, in that, and I've got to remember who it was, but it was the fact that they were explaining mythology and storytelling and connecting that back to country. It was a husband and wife team that come from Hilo, and the whole stage was filled with a combination of what he called an academic village, people that support him in his work, his children, and students of the school. and just the combination of song, dance, and story, and connecting that to a young person's identity in their learning journey was just amazing. It was amazing to see that it was not just one person, that he brought the whole village or community with him. And yeah, there was a lot of highlights in it. I think Lisa would remember one of the phrases he said.
Oh my.
Going
yeah, the oh my.
Which so I think that was one of the major highlights for me, anyway. Even though it was a very warm day for a lot of visitors, and it was in the open air. It was extremely entertaining, but also really informative. And it really showed how it takes a community to raise a child and be solid in their identity, and how culture is used as a foundation. Yeah, I really enjoyed that presentation.
Yeah, no, I agree. There were so many excellent workshops. I really liked the one on food sovereignty, not just because you got to taste test food. That was pretty cool. But, you know, talking about it, for me, some of the workshops on language and sovereignty and the food sovereignty ones were about, even though they were talking about a Hawaiian context or talking about somebody from, you know, North America, a community from North America, for me, I was just sitting there going, okay, so how will I apply this at home? How could I do what they're doing? Because what they're doing is working, and it fits within the ideology or the ethos of what, you know, we're talking about. But how do you do that? So, for instance, the food sovereignty presentation was talking about how do we take what was a food staple, the taro, and the taro is not just a food. It's it's actually woven into Hawaiian story and Hawaiian understanding, and not just Hawaiian, but throughout the whole Polynesian Pacific area. But, you know, really, how do you take? So prior to colonization, the taro was it was a food staple. It was a part of the story of the country, of the land, of the people, and it was also, you know, really quite strongly a women's domain in a sense. And so, but that's kind of been eroded post-colonization by, you know, and other starch staples like bread and rice and pasta and those kinds of things have found their way into people's diets, and not just their diets, but the whole economy and the whole, you know, sort of cultural practice. How do you bring back the taro? Because it's not just about diet and health, it's also about, you know, sovereignty. So those kinds of things are like, and then I'm trying to relate that to my context, like how do I, not to bring back the taro, but what's the staple starch from where we live and where we come from? So thinking about some of those things was really, really interesting, and you just kind of spend the whole 6 days going, oh, how do I do that? You know, so yeah, it was really exciting, and it's about that constant conversation for 6 days of embedding Indigenous knowledges into your life, into your practice, and, you know, into your education practice as a teacher, but also as your life as a Māori person. So one of the other things I was blown away with the conference was just how great value for money it was. I mean, it was just under $600 US, but for that you got a 6-day conference. So it wasn't just 3 or 4 days; it was 6 days. Admittedly, the opening day and closing day weren't quite as long. You got a full day of presentations. The presentation started at 8 a.m., went straight through to the evening. There was entertainment in the evening. There were excursions, and some of those excursions were like full-on sort of not tourist, but, you know, like buses were needed to take people to places of all across the island. It was quite amazing. There was Wi-Fi on the campus. You were fed breakfast, lunch, a couple of dinners. So what was really amazing was that as a conference, it was incredibly cost effective. Like, I was really surprised. I don't quite know how they managed to pull it off. So that was excellent. What excursion did you go on?
Yeah, the hospitality of the Hawaiian people was phenomenal.
I have to show everybody this. That coming up. You see this? This is one of the gifts. Every presenter got a gift. So it was a nice necklace. So I got one of these because I presented. These were handmade by the students. So that was pretty cool. So every presenter got one or two. I actually got some other gifts from somebody else as well. So, for presenting. But yeah, excellent hospitality.
And also, the customer giving was very evident with the nations at the beginning presenting gifts to the host nations, But as you said, when you presented the workshop, there was one or two gifts. People that were in workshops often gave gifts to the participants as well, and that ranged from like a cultural bracelet to a presentation on a USB to one presentation I went to, giving each participant a copy of her book, which is phenomenal, especially with the topic that we were talking about. She's doing that
I want to write up a post about maybe how to prepare for a WIPSI conference. Some of the things you need to do, like if you're from an organisation, take stuff with you that you can give away and share, because you build relationships that way. It's not just, you don't give stuff away because you think you're going to get stuff back, but you give stuff away to build relationships and, to be a part of something that we don't necessarily do here, but I think we don't do it in any kind of formal way, and certainly not in the way that the Hawaiians, and I think you've spoken before about the Calgary mob do the gift giving stuff. But you want to take stuff with you and be prepared to share parts of your work and your culture with other people.
Yeah, definitely. But with regards to the cultural excursion, I was fortunate enough to go to a school, like a cultural immersion school, and that was a fabulous opportunity. When we arrived there, it was in the bush, so to speak, and it was a number of demountables, and like you wouldn't have even recognised it as a school from the street. But the students there were fabulous. The staff were unbelievable, and they were just so accommodating to us. When we first arrived, the students, we stood in the middle, and the students surrounded us in a circle. We were separated with men and women, and they were doing like the welcoming song and singing us into the place. And just seeing their campus and what they do, but also they again, the hospitality, they had morning tea and stuff for us, and coffee, and good coffee, which was good. And then we broke up into workshops that were run by the students, and it was just phenomenal that these young people were teaching us what they'd learnt, and it's all based on their traditional knowledge. Like one workshop was around navigation and stuff, because the students are preparing to do like a little solo voyage of sailing and stuff. So that it was how to plot to get from one point to another. And they showed us how to do it, and then we had to do it, which was a bit challenging. And then another workshop around navigation from the stars and the local language name for each one. And it was just great to see young people sharing what they learnt. I remember I asked one student what she liked about the school, and she said that it's a place where they develop her cultural identity. And in primary school she didn't have that.
Yeah.
So the whole curriculum is based on the local traditions, and then putting that into everyday practice and making learning relevant for these students. They started out as a 6 to 12 school, I think, and now they have extended that to 4 to 12. And students have to have like 5 years of language education before they can attend the school, because a lot of the classes are conducted in language. There, and this year, I think for the third year in a row, the Year 12 class, 100% have got college acceptance. So that's just phenomenal, really. I really enjoyed spending the day at that school and seeing how they operate.
That's fantastic.
And you?
It makes you wonder what kind of some of the things that you can do when you're trying to build a school, particularly an immersion school.
Yeah, there's about, I think they've got about 120 students in the school. So.
My excursion, I went to the Women's Community Correction Centre, so it's on the island of Oahu, which is where Honolulu is. The main island. Well, it's not the main island. It's the island that Honolulu is on. So it's like a bus ride away. The Women's Community Correction Centre is the from what I understand, is the main prison or main correction centre for all women who are in the state of Hawaii. So women from the outer island, all of the other islands will come there. And the warden spoke to us. He greeted us, and and he was talking about how what do you do for here? Well, what they realised is that the majority of women are Native women. The majority of women are there because of lack of education, poverty, substance abuse, and the majority of women have that end up in the correction centre have at some point between the ages of 4 and 17 suffered some kind of abuse, whether it's physical abuse or sexual abuse, and not just one-off events but long-term events or multiple events. And so what he realised, and I don't know if it was just him or a group of people, but they realised that they were having to deal with social stuff that happens out in the world. So this stuff happens in the world, out in society, so to speak, and the consequences of it are what happens here at the Women's Correction Centre. And he said to us, he said, well, what would a place look like if this was a place of healing rather than punishment? And that's their focus. What does healing look like? How do you develop a healing program? How do you develop a program that is not about treatment? It's not just treatment. It's not about medical treatment, but it's about healing from a Hawaiian point of view, from a Native woman's point of view. And so it was absolutely fantastic day. Just came away completely inspired by the women. It's a minimum, medium and maximum security prison, and there were women from all of those areas in the program. We were greeted by the women, and they have a area of farmland, or an area. It's not huge, like it's within walking distance, and they have. So we visited 3 or 4 different sections of this plot, or this space. One of the areas was looking at breadfruit, which is a fruit or a tree that is very. They basically say it's the plant that will feed the world. It's hardy, and it's also very nourishing, and it's a staple. It can be a staple. So that part of the project, or part of the work that they do there, is about growing breadfruit, because it can then feed the world. Another component of the project was a lay garden. So L-E-Y, lei, like a traditional lei garden, and the women actually make leis, and they learn how to make them traditionally. So this is a traditional lei that the women gave us. So we got one at each of these when we walked in, and Customs let me keep it. Thank you, Australian Customs. So it's made out of a tea leaf. So I don't know much about tea leaves, but this is not the tea leaf that you drink tea of, but out of. But they're each leaf is frozen. They freeze them, makes them easier to roll. So they're rolled into into like a rope, and then here you put flowers and things. So yeah, that's the traditional lei. So they actually have a lei garden where they're growing traditional plants, and they're learning techniques about how to make leis. This is a dusty, been bag for a week. The traditional rose, which you can put it in the lei. But the other parts of the program was where they learn horticulture, basic kind of horticulture, and what's the plant that grows in water? You know, the little lettuces that grow in water? Hydroponic plants. So so all of the food that they grow actually goes and feeds the prison, and I think they sell some of it at markets as well. And one of the other things that they had was actually created these little balcony gardens, so that when you go out, when you leave the correction centre and off you go, you've learned how to grow a garden if the only garden space you have is a small balcony. So I think it's really practical, and a lot of stuff from recycled materials. A lot of we met women who were involved in a local gardening group, and they volunteered and came back to work with the women from the correction centre. A lot of women who were released came back to work with the women from the correction centre within that program. And the other part of the program was also they had a garden area that was actually a reflection and a meditation spot. So the women had completely transformed this there's a little stream. We weren't allowed to take photos, which is why I have no photos. We weren't allowed to take any cameras and things in. But and they all have their own taro plots. So, and the taro plot only lives because that woman decides that she's going to look after it, and they all have names and they all have stories. And the women shared with us these amazing stories about their journey. Some of them had been in there for a long time, over a decade. Some of them, it was their second or third stint inside, but through this program they were actually learning how to cope, anger management. They were learning about their own journey, and a lot of the stuff was about, you could find the metaphor or the understanding about, they were taking stuff that they were learning about gardening into their own life. So, there are weeds in your garden and you have to clear out the weeds. But if you let the weeds grow too much, they can take over. So finding those similarities with life and finding meaning in life, the journey that we all take, I guess. So it was a fantastic program. We had a good lunch because they fed us. So they cooked the lunch, and everything that we ate they had cooked. They have over there. We have in Australia cup murrays, New Zealand's hungies, and in Hawaii it was emus, I think. So they had one of those. They have a pit there for that. It was a fantastic day. I could not have imagined how. I'm not sure what I expected, but it kind of reminds me of the work that Sisters Inside in Brisbane do about rethinking what prisons and punishment is, and I think that's why I was inspired to go, and I'm so glad, really, really glad that I did. So it was fantastic. It was a fantastic.
Interesting too, with the gardens and stuff, because at the school that was one of the first things that the students showed us as well, is the garden at the school that had like a variety of traditional food sources. The principal said as well that they don't have the funds and equipment for a PE, physical education program. So their physical education is looking after this garden, producing foods the traditional way, and they have an outdoor teaching area for that, and their hula lessons. At the end of the day, each year level performed for us, from traditional to contemporary. So it was the whole school up, celebrating culture and expression of their cultural expressions and stuff, which was just fabulous to see. I'd love our young people to see it as well, because there was no shame factor there, you know. Everyone was up and having a go, and proud to be having a go. So that was fabulous.
Can I say something? Do you think too it's not just young people though that shame stuff? I mean, when you were watching the dances and all the different groups get up, Australia was the only one that had young people dancing, like kids dancing. All the other nations had adults dancing. I just thought that was really interesting. Like what happens to us when we get older? We get shame and we don't want to do it. Only the young people can dance. I don't know. I was just thinking about that. I was like, the kids dancing, but anyway. So the next conference is in Toronto in 2017. You going to be there?
Oh, hopefully, definitely. I think. Hopefully, definitely. You know, I've only missed 2, so.
That was the first 2.
Sorry?
That was the first 2, eh?
The first 2, yeah.
And you would have been in school then, so.
Mind you, the first one I would have still been in high school. But you know, but no, I think it's a great opportunity to see how, you know, other Indigenous communities and nations are incorporating Indigenous knowledge and ways of doing and seeing into school curriculum, into the academy. You know, it's I think it's the only professional development that I know of that is run by Indigenous people for Indigenous people with regards to education. So, and it is only once every 3 years. So, something I think a lot of people look forward to attending.
Well, we've all been Googling the prices of airfares for Toronto. It's a bit more expensive than from Australia to Toronto than Australia to Hawaii, so definitely better start upgrading now. Hey, you should plug your Facebook group, Lisa.
Oh, yeah, we've started a Facebook group. This was one of the biggest representation that I'd seen of Catholic education at a WIPSI conference. So at the moment we're just starting with like people that are involved in Catholic education and staying connected, I suppose, and in preparation for the next one. Yeah, so we started a Facebook page for that.
I'll put the links up. It's a Facebook group basically for folks who are in Catholic ed in Australia and overseas. So
yeah,
I'm in the group. I'm not in Catholic ed, so everybody's welcome.
Catholic ed and Aboriginal education and yeah, people that are working towards you know, embedding Indigenous knowledge and ways of being into our school curricula and teaching practices.
Okay, cool. All right, so thank you, Lisa. WIPSI was awesome. We're going to try and be there in Toronto in 2017. I have to sell a lot of T-shirts to get to Toronto. If you've just joined us, this is the second after dinner session hangout with the Critical Classroom. The Critical Classroom aims to provide resources for teachers wishing to embed or explore Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledges and ideas into their classroom practice. And we're hoping to run these hangouts regularly. Lisa says not weekly. I reckon we should do them weekly, but I don't know. What do you reckon? No. What do you reckon? Not likely. Okay, she says it's not likely. But anyway, that's okay. So the second section, the second part of our hangout is looking at new resources. She's sick. She's in Sydney. That's why, because she lives in Sydney. She's not feeling well because it's not really winter here, even though it technically is winter. It's not really winter. So I have 2 resources because Lisa hasn't got one. So I've actually done 2. Okay, so the first resource that I want to show you is it's a Black Wave Festival. It's a publication by the curators, Taji Moore and Emily Sexton, who were the curators of the Black Wave Festival, which is part of the New Wave Festival in Melbourne just last month. And they also edited this publication, and it's very reasonably priced. It's only $25. But what I like about it, it's reasonably priced, which of course is very good for everybody. But it's a collection of essays, vignettes I think is probably the word, photographic essays, artwork and images from 28 Indigenous or Black, BLAK, writers and artists. There's an interview with Tony Albert, Laurie Nielsen and Dale Harding, all Indigenous visual artists, Aboriginal visual artists. There's images by Lucy Simpson, who's, now I might say this incorrectly, but Gawa Miye Design Studio is doing quite well this right now. She's very hot right now. There's an interview with, there's an essay by Troy Anthony Bayliss. His essay is called I Can See Queerly Now. There's also an essay by Indigenous curator Clotilde Bullen, who is a curator in Western Australia. I find the photographic essay, I think, is probably the right word for it, right term for it, by Chase, called Me in Me Backyard. Pretty interesting. I think she's challenging a lot of assumptions, and I think what I really like about it is the fact that it does. It's a collection of work that really does challenge our stereotypical ideas of what Aboriginal art is and who Aboriginal artists are and the sort of work they do. Jason Wing has an essay there on his Chinese and Aboriginal identity. Megan Cope has an interview. Megan and Richard Bell have an interview. And there's also an essay with Celeste Little, the ranting black feminist. If you know her work, I'll put the links in. So what I think, it's really good. It's an excellent book. It's an essential book for your university art library collection. And I also think it's an excellent text that should go in your high school art library, particularly for Indigenous students, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, who may not see themselves in what we typically know of as Aboriginal art. And I do know that many teachers are still stuck in that idea of what Aboriginal art is and have not yet been able to kind of expand their understanding or expand their knowledge about the sheer diversity of Aboriginal art that is out today. So it's $25. I'll put the link in there. Hopefully they should have some. There'll be some left, I'm sure of it. But yeah, it's an excellent publication. I hope that they do it again. It would be great to see this kind of a publication be repeated, for a couple of decades, and would be an excellent archive of the growth and development of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art practice over, a significant period. So kind of like a black wave needs to be a wave. You need to invest in it and give it time to actually be the wave, not just like the little bit of water. It's actually got to be a wave. So I'm hoping that whoever, it's probably like the Arts Victoria, City of Melbourne people, Australian Government, Australia Council, I hope those folks decide to repeat this over and over again. So it's definitely worth it. So that's my first resource that I think that I would like to feature this week. Now my second resource is an online resource. It's free. You don't have to pay for it. And I need to screen share it with you. I'm not going to play it for you because I think you should listen for yourself. But this is a short video piece. It only goes for a couple of minutes, and I think it would be excellent for probably senior schools. I think senior students. I think it's also excellent for PD sessions, so professional development sessions with teachers. Dr. Chelsea Bond is a Mununjali and South Sea Islander woman, and I have to declare a conflict of interest. She's my cousin. And she's also an academic at the University of Queensland. Oh, she's your cousin too, Lisa, on her mum's side. but in this piece, short video work, what Chelsea's doing is really talking about Indigenous identity, talking about how, talking about the stereotypical stuff, and talking about why there are misconceptions about the way Aboriginality and Aboriginal identity is portrayed. The title of it is called Black Is. It's the 3rd episode. It's from BIMA, which is the Brisbane Indigenous Media Association. BIMA are doing a lot of really amazing work with documenting and pulling together lots of different ideas. So using a lot of video and sound kind of tools to do that. So it's really exciting. So I'm just going to show you a screenshot. How do I do that again? I've got to remember how to do it. Okay, hold on. I'll pull this up. So you know when you find it, what you're looking for. So, but I'll put the link in the website. I'll put the link in the show notes. So screen share here. Start screen share. So you can see it there. So that's Chelsea in the middle. And that's just the episode. So it's on Vimeo. It's not on YouTube, so I can't actually link to it from YouTube. So it's a good one. And she's wearing a very deadly shirt that everybody should buy a copy of. Okay, that's cheating. All right, so that's our 2 resources for this week. Okay, Lisa, we have a question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are you ready? So we have a section on our website called What's Your Problem? And we mean that in the nicest possible way, where we encourage people to, if you've got a question, ask it, and we'll try and answer it. We've answered a few. We answered one last week on resources, talking about invasion. This week's question was actually submitted straight after last week's, our very first after dinner hangout. Now, there's 2 parts to this question. I've divided it into 2 parts. So the question is, how prepared do you think the education sector is to address issues of distrust and disengagement from school for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people and their families? The second part of the question is, what resources would be helpful for teachers to engage young people in education? Now, I'm going to put that up on the wall so that everybody can see it. Screen share again. I'm the queen of screen sharing. Start screen share. This is the one here. So there you go. So that's the question there, Lisa. How prepared do you think the education sector is to address issues of distrust and disengagement from school for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people and their families? My instinct is to say that they're not very well prepared. What do you reckon, Lisa?
Well, firstly, I think it's a huge question. But I agree. I don't think that education systems are very well prepared for it.
It's a huge question because I think that if you've got issues of distrust and disengagement, and there may be a whole bunch of issues at play, like, for instance, mental health issues, or health issues, juvenile justice issues, family safety issues, and how can the average school work with different agencies? And I think that, I don't necessarily think that they're prepared for that sort of thing.
No, and I think really this question comes down to what a lot of things do with regards to our children and young people, in that it is all about relationships, getting to know the student and the parents and the families. And I don't know how well equipped schools are to be able to do that, especially within our secondary school systems. I think some schools are doing it really well, and other schools are just starting this journey. And as you said, it is getting into contact with services outside of the school, which some schools may not necessarily be familiar with, and knowing where to go and who to contact, You know, some systems have regional Aboriginal community liaison officers, but generally that's one person across a large area, or a district, if you will, where there is often a number of schools within that area, you know, up to 50 different schools. So these people are stretched quite thinly, and have good contacts within the community, but they can't work in isolation.
Yeah.
Need the support of the school leadership team and the teachers within the school.
Yeah.
Some schools are lucky enough to have Aboriginal education workers within their school, and they're a critical link between community and school. But again, they can't work in isolation either. So I think largely it's about developing relationships with community and schools, but getting to know. What do you just do then? Getting to know.
I try to reach out often I can't. I don't even know if I have. But anyway.
But really getting to know your kids, getting to know your students, and you know, and I realise that, you know, teachers and schools are very busy places as well, you know, with the curriculum and content that they've got to get through. But really it's about relationships and getting to know our kids.
The other issue, I don't know if I'm appearing on this anymore, so I'm going to bring the question up because you don't want to look at just nothing. I think one of the other issues, though, I mean, it's not, if there's distrust and disengagement, part of that may also be as a result of schools have to actually take some responsibility for the way that they approach Aboriginal people, Aboriginal communities, Aboriginal students, Aboriginal topics. I mean, there's racism with
definitely, and that's why the question's so huge, really. Yeah. In the scope of it, you'd have to take like different elements of it and look at it from there. Like why is there this distrust? Why is there disengagement?
And whether the disengagement is, you know, and that's kind of a dodgy word, because sometimes engagement and disengagement is almost, you know, remember we used to talk about the deficit model, you know, the kids are disengaged. It's like, well, sometimes I think it's the schools that are disengaged from children. Schools and systems, and it's not about individual systems, individual teachers and things, or sometimes it is, but quite often it's the system is disengaged from humans. The system is disengaged from the way that people like
authentic learning, and is the learning relevant for that child, you know?
Yeah.
And in a lot of it may not be.
Yeah. And maybe the other issue is that you need to look at it from a local perspective. It's not necessarily something that you can't just apply things across, you know, regions or even states or the nation. Look locally.
No, we need to be looking more at you know, place-based education and stuff, especially with regards to Aboriginal perspectives, and incorporating that into the curriculum. That it needs to be local and contemporary.
Okay,
as well.
So what's the second part of the question is what resources would be helpful to get kids back in education? I mean, I know that the Commonwealth government likes the idea of truancy officers that will force kids to get back into the classroom, but you know, what are the helpful resources? The ones that, what sorts of things would you suggest if someone were new to a position and that was part of their role?
Well, I mean, you've got people resources, but I mean,
that's my favorite thing.
Networks within the community, but also print resources as well. You know, I mean, kids want to see other people like them, or within texts, you know, and looking at resources that are out there that show around identity and contemporary identity, I think would be a good place to start. Resources and novels that you know, provide insight into their lived experience, if you will, instead of it all being so far removed from their daily lives or you know, their community life, and you know, contacting people within the community to be able to access those sort of resources.
Yeah. And I think you've got to be prepared to. You almost have to be a. So, for instance, if your job was as a liaison officer or a community engagement person within a school system, I mean, you really have to have your finger on the pulse, know what's going on in the community, use the people that are within your community. I mean, one of the schools that I'm currently unofficially connected with, you know, they've had some little people are having a bit of trouble staying on track, and you know, we have one old fellow who comes in and just reads to the kids for half an hour a week, and you know, it's that kind of thing that stuff is possible. You don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money, because a lot of things take money, but you don't necessarily have to do that. But it's about knowing who's in your community, and getting to know your community and build relationships within it first.
Yeah, and you know, mentors for the kids, and you know, that there might be an uncle or an aunt out there that would be willing to come in for half an hour once a month, you know, just to check in and see how the child's doing, or a couple of kids are doing. And sometimes it is just that space to just have a yarn with someone that comes from their own cultural background, and just, you know, a place or a person to make contact with. And there are people within our communities that are willing to do that.
I mean, you can also do fun stuff like, you know, like the Deadly Awards are coming up. So host your own Deadly Awards. Stuff like that makes kids feel special, or makes them feel like, you know, they can achieve, or they are deadly, for want of a better word. You know, it's that kind of thing, like finding out what's going on in the world and then relating it back to the young people that are in your school that you're actually working with. And have fun. You know, you've got to have fun to do this stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so thank you very much. I hope we've answered your question, Mr. T from Far North Queensland. So thank you very much. If you have any questions for us, please let us know, and I mean, hopefully we'll be able to be a little bit more specific. That was a very big question. You asked a very huge question, so the question was very big. The answers were huge as well. So thanks for joining. Did you want to say anything, Lisa? I was just going to wrap up.
No, you can wrap up. That's good.
Wrap up. So thanks for joining us on our. You survived it without coughing. I'm the only one that did. So thank you for joining us on our second Critical Classroom hangout. We're very happy to be doing this for folks. We've had a few hits on the very first one, so that's exciting. And we hope to be doing this more often. Tonight we've talked a lot about the WIPSI conference, the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education. I have a few posts to write up that I haven't written yet because of, you know, jet lag. I'll blame jet lag. But I hope to write up in the next few weeks. Don't forget that it is now, so it is the 4th of June. It's the 4th of June today, which means Black History Month and NAIDOC Week are only a few days away. 30 days have September, April, June, and November. So 26 days away. So you should be getting ready for Black History Month right now. If you are not, I don't know what you're doing. I'll repost a few Black History Month posts. But if you are not already following Australia's Black History Month on Facebook, you should be. Black History Aust, A-U-S-T, on Twitter. There will be 31 new great moments in Black History fact sheets available from the 1st of July. We haven't written them yet, but they will be available. So yes, if you absolutely must be talking about NAIDOC Week and Black History Month by now. If you're not, you should be. And we will talk about that a little bit more in our next hangout. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, as well as at the blog. We will write some new posts. We don't have a Critical Classroom YouTube channel, so you have to follow me, Lisa Watego, for all of our videos. I've also added a new a new video to the Critical Classroom Teaching Resources playlist. It's featuring Celeste Little. A lot of the resources that we share are not just for kids or, you know, high school and primary school students, but they're also for adults and young people. Young people, teen, early 20s. It's not just for kids. It's not just stuff you can use in your classroom, because I honestly believe that if you're going to teach if you're going to understand what it is that you're teaching about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander issues and people and communities and histories, Australian history, you really need to be constantly embedding these things. And you're going to find knowledge from lots of different places. So it might be from a poem, and then you'll read the poem, and then 3 weeks later you'll see a YouTube video and you go, oh, I think that's what that was talking about. So you're going to make those connections, but you have to be constantly working on it. It's like any form of exercise that I don't do, but you should be doing with your brain. Don't forget to have a look at our playlist. We're going to be talking about NAIDOC next. I think that's about it, Lisa.
I think so.
That's it. That was very good. We did it. And Google Hangouts can be really confusing. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you later. See ya.
Good night.
Good night.